So, this is democracy in action. I'm proposing that we move immediately to the political forum, try to get that taken care of in 20 minutes, and then do our Q&A and discussion. The alternative is to have Q&A to the panel now. How many people would prefer to move ahead with the political forum right now? All in favor? Aye. Okay, about half the room. How many people would prefer to do some Q&A now with the panel and then do the political forum?
Oh, do it
And, no, we're not that laboring. I think that second group was a little larger. Am I right? I think the second group, so I lose. Oh, that's fine. Okay, so that means, how about the compromise? We'll take a few questions for the panel. That's a bit of a compromise. We'll limit it and then return to the forum. Does that sound okay? Okay, so let's take 3 questions. Obviously, there's a few people with key, burning, urgent, and interesting questions for the panel. Let's try to do this in 10 minutes or so. Okay, one here, and go ahead.
Okay.
And we'll take all the questions and then get a response from the panel. Somebody at the back.
Okay, so I may be in trouble for not knowing the answer to this, but I'll ask Peter. Of the 50 cities that Deepak Chopra had these public closed-door meetings, how many of them were in conservative ridings? Do we know? We don't know.
Have to dig
Okay, because
that out.
I know there were several of them that were reported, and I just don't know how many of the 50.
That would be too obvious a manipulation, wouldn't it? Okay, Jim, and then there's a fellow at the back.
The one thing that wasn't mentioned that I'd like some feedback on is they talked about how they met just with businesses and with some local politicians when they went around to talk to people. And it's perhaps not surprising then, if they did that the result is that they're not taking door-to-door delivery away from businesses. They're only taking it away from seniors, single moms, and regular folk. Okay, so they're not taking door-to-door away from businesses. The other thing that they've done recently is that they raised the price of a stamp. But they didn't raise the price of a stamp equally. If you're a large business and you organize your mailing list in a certain fashion, it's going to cost you 67 cents for a stamp. If your grandma going down to mail your kid's Christmas card, it's going to cost you $1. Okay, so that kind of a massive skew in the price that they charged didn't exist before. Before you would get maybe a 7-cent premium for doing this kind of thing. Okay, and then the last thing that I haven't heard anybody really talk about is the health and safety problem. Now, I'm a letter carrier. I work full-time for the union, but I'm a letter carrier, and I haven't, when I was delivering, it was never a winter I didn't fall. It just, came with the territory. You fell on your ass, hopefully you didn't break something. But I'm walking down one side of the street, crossing, and then coming back. So there I'm doing two blocks to deliver the houses on that block face. If you have a CMB, everybody in those houses is walking down the street, okay, to the CMB to get their mail. The amount of distances being traveled is a factor of 10 or 15, according to the analysis that I've done. So that, if I, seasoned person with appropriate gear, grip-ons and this kind of thing fall once, and you multiply the distance traveled, and there's people with canes and walkers and not necessarily the most stable of the kids, the amount of accidents that's going to happen is going to go up 10, 15 times. Okay, and if I fall and I break my leg, I've got workers' comp. I mean, I don't want to fall, I don't want to break my leg, but I've got workers' comp. If you fall going to get your mail, who's covering you? Nobody. They're offloading onto the people all of the factors. They're offloading the workers' compensation costs, they're offloading everything onto ordinary people and killing 7,000 good jobs in the process. It's a sin. I know that wasn't a question, that was a speech.
But it was a pretty good one. It's a pretty good one, and I appreciate in particular the reference to healthcare at the end, because I know we've got some healthcare activists in the room, and isn't it interesting how these things interact, right? People can't pay for their drugs. We're hearing of more cuts and bed closures in the Ottawa hospital. Like, these things fit together. I mean, it's a very interesting point. Okay, one last one from the back. and then Donald.
Did not Canada Post years ago have a savings bank? As a matter of fact, it was created.
did.
after 100 years.
Very true.
For some reason, it was done away with.
I'll tell you the
I just remind people that democracy is a very fragile thing, and it can disappear.
Sorry, folks, listen
very
up.
quickly. History is replete with examples of how that happens. You don't have to, and this government has done its utmost to undermine the democratic process in this country. You can see examples of it. How many times have they prorogued Parliament? Every time they came up against something they didn't want to deal with or didn't want to handle. I think that the best way of dealing with this government is to vote them out of office as soon as possible, before they change the electoral system so that it's all in their favor. They're doing that right now.
So we can't vote them out of office. Very good point. Okay, we'll return to the politics. Very good. I'm going to take one last one. I said I'd take three, but I'll take Donald, and then we'll get into that political forum piece. Very briefly.
I wanted to pick up on the 7,000 jobs, good jobs, at least relatively good jobs. And it seems to me that that's kind of at the crux of the attack on not just the post office, but the public sector generally. That most of the unionized workforce is now in the public sector. Starting jobs in the private sector are 11, 12, 14 bucks an hour. Postal worker is not a rich person, but they make closer to 20 or 22, you guys can. Well,
Something like that.
you know, so I mean, part of the at the center of the attack on the public sector is the attack on the unionized part of the workforce to try to get rid of those public sector jobs, which create pressure on the private sector to increase their wages. And I think that that's a common element in all of these things, all the privatizations, is that they're all about shifting to non-union, lower wage work, and it seems to me there's a common point around which we could organize struggles.
Very good point. Okay, maybe what I'll suggest is if you guys, based on all those points, have any kind of quick thoughts
I have a
to
quick
share on any of those questions, please go ahead, Peter.
Thanks for jogging my memory, and I only had 12 minutes, so I took 15, maybe 17. Yeah, you can be sure Bay Street is not going to lose their door-to-door delivery. They will still get it. But that's what they mean by business. So if you got a mom and pop, and even down the Wellington strip, you may or may not have door-to-door delivery. The stamp price increase was actually 58%, which is egregious. When they had their conversation with Canadians, they indicated people wouldn't mind a modest or small stamp increase. I don't consider 58% increase to be modest anyway. And that's what I'm talking about. They're trying to murder the post office. And actually, our office is at Colonnade Pizza. That's where our regional office is. I was talking to the owner, Khalil, who's a good businessman, and he said, that's the same if I raised my prices double and made you walk to Bank Street to pick up your pizza, I wouldn't be in business, right? So he gets it, right? So it really is pro-business, and Jim's point is excellent. And to the gentleman in the back, yes, in 1966, they closed the postal bank down because the big banks wanted it gotten rid of. It was competition. But the big banks have fled the scene, and and they say, well, the small banks won't work. Well, PC's into banking. Ing is a ING is a non-branch bank. They're all getting into it. I mean, this says it all. Silence is golden. Emptiness says words, right? I mean, where's the rest of it? So that's my interventions, and I think the remote.
I think it might be most interesting if we kind of start from the top and come down to the room. So my suggestion is I'm going to share what was sent to us organizers from the mayor's office. I'll start with that. Then I will share and read out what was sent to us by Councillor Hobbs. And then I'm going to invite, we've got one remaining candidate in the room, Jeff Leiper, to share share his thoughts, 4 or 5 minutes, on the subject and concerns that we've been dealing with tonight. And then after that, we can have a final go-round of questions to them or us, and discussion about action and what we do about it, how we go forward from here. Okay, from the mayor's office. And I don't have a copy of it with me, but I invited the mayor to come and join us tonight. Generally, I tried to briefly describe the concerns that have been articulated in briefer terms. Yeah, and I should just set this up a little bit. So people know, many of you may know this already, but for those of you that don't, the mayor has actually expressed himself on these issues to a degree. And in fact, interestingly enough, some of you will participated in, there was a major march and action on this issue on January 26th here in Ottawa on a cold day, but it was a very good turnout, it was a good start. The next day in the Ottawa Citizen, Mayor Watson was quoted, having been interviewed by a reporter, expressing concern about the announced plans of Canada Post and calling for a halt in the process, expressing concern for the costs and liabilities that might be passed to municipalities, and complaining about the lack of process and consultation with municipalities in the process. He did not express opposition in principle to the concept of ending home delivery. I just make that point in passing. And then likewise, he worked apparently with a group called the Big City Mayors Caucus, BCMC. And this was publicly reported, to pass a resolution at that level. But as I said earlier, Ottawa City Council has passed no resolution. I'm not even sure they've discussed it. But at council, you've spoken to people.
We've met with councillors, and just and very quickly, and we're
you
we're
know more about this than I do.
We're going to approach what's called FECTO, which is a sort of the economic committee. I think in June. We're going to approach them in June, and once they're approached in June, then that sets up it going to council for a vote, and we're sort of going to give them that. Then we're going to present our resolution that we want passed, and council will vote on it. But it has to go to this first committee first, and that's really where it's going to happen or not happen. But we have had meetings with the mayor and some councillors, so I would say we're making very positive progress.
Making progress. Okay, well, this may be partly reflected in this, but people can decide. The response to our email says, thank you for your invitation to attend your town hall meeting on April 9th. Regretfully, I have 3 other commitments that evening, so I can't attend. However, contrary to your email, and in my email, I had expressed concern about his lack of principled opposition to the proposal, I have taken steps to outline my objections to the reduction in service and increase in postage prices. On February 26th, at my insistence, the Big City Mayors Caucus passed the attached resolution. In discussions with CUPW and the Ottawa District Labour Council, I suggested this resolution route would have a greater impact than a City Council resolution. I've also written to the President of Canada Post and the appropriate minister to outline my objections. Thank you for organizing the meeting. So he attached a copy of the resolution passed at Big City Mayors, and I'll just read it very quickly. The resolution says, whereas this is, I can't remember which of the big cities, but it's like the 4 or 5 big cities. Toronto, Calgary, Vancouver, Montreal. Whereas Canada Letter Mail that will significantly increase costs of municipal mailouts, and whereas Canada Post is also proposing the introduction of community mailboxes, CMBs, and the elimination of non-commercial door-to-door mail delivery, whereas the CMBs could entail the downloading of responsibilities, costs, and liabilities to local governments, including increased requirements for managing municipal land and rights-of-way infrastructure such as paving and lighting and policing related to vandalism, graffiti, and mail theft, and whereas the loss of door-to-door delivery could also undermine local strategies and processes aimed at fostering and supporting age and disability-friendly communities, whereas municipalities were not consulted on the proposed changes, therefore be it resolved that the Big City Mayors Caucus call on Canada Post to halt the elimination of door-to-door delivery until concerns are addressed through meaningful consultations with the mayors of the caucus before implementation of the plan. And be it further resolved that Canada Post commit that the proposed changes in the 5-point action plan do not download the costs and maintenance of the community boxes onto municipalities without proper consultation and compensation. That's the Big City Mayors, and I promised I would read this out and share this with folks here tonight. Following that, I received a communication by email from Councillor Hobbs, and I'll read that out now. Dear Kevin, I wish to thank you for this kind invitation for this serious issue affecting all Canadians and of great concern to the City of Ottawa. Unfortunately, I cannot attend as I have a previous commitment that I accepted over a month ago. I think I sent the invitation 2 weeks ago. I believe that Canada Post have a long way to go before proving this new policy fits into our urban environment, and I have seen nothing to date. I have not yet seen a proposal from Canada Post that addresses any of the concerns that many residents have expressed, and I do not support community mailboxes, especially in the urban core and in Kitchissippi ward specifically. I am also pleased with the mayor's strong actions in this regard, and for the effort of all the big city mayors across Canada who have united on this issue. While I regret not being able to attend, I would very much appreciate an overview on the concerns from those who attend tomorrow night. This was sent yesterday. If you would like to do this by email or in person, I'm happy to make this as possible for you. This information will be very helpful in my quest to ensure that everyone in our community will get equal treatment and retain this important service. That's from Councillor Hobbs. So we can talk about that, but we do have Jeff in the room. Let's just go right to him. And a few minutes, we promised at least 4 or 5 minutes for any candidate.
And I should say thanks very much to the organizers for inviting me. Thanks in particular to Kevin. This is not an issue on which I've previously done a deep dive, so I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to get that nudge to take a look more closely at the issue. My name is Jeff Leiper. I'm running for councillor in Kitchissippi ward. And I'll start out by saying that I am opposed to the end of home delivery in urban neighborhoods. I think that the proposal as it stands right now is going to hurt some of our more vulnerable populations, demographic who have chosen not to use the internet or who don't have access to the internet, people who have mobility challenges, and folks who have socioeconomic disadvantages. I think it also has the potential to impose unacceptable costs on municipalities that are already cash-strapped and struggling to deliver the services that taxpayers expect them to. I believe that there are a couple of approaches that Ottawa can take to oppose these cuts and demonstrate leadership, and lead Ottawa should. I feel as though I'm on familiar ground in this discussion. Until recently, I spent about 5 years at the CRTC as a manager and an executive, dealing with the effects of digital disruption in trying to ensure that the public interest objectives of the broadcasting and telecommunication spaces were being achieved in the face of internet disruption. Some of you may know there are still regulators out there who regulate postal services and telecommunications under the same regulator. I was reading through the conference board report last night, and I'm looking at a lot of the same sources. I did spend last night reading the conference board report, and I went to the quarterly financials, the most recently quarterly results from Canada Post. And I do believe that Canada Post is facing challenges. We can quibble. None of the key metrics from a business perspective at Canada Post are moving in the right direction. It has, I think, an alarmingly large unfunded pension liability. I'm surprised at the level of liquid assets that it has in reserve. Its only bright spot, Purolator, which over the past 3 quarters has been doing literally double-digit increases in revenue, is still a relatively small part of the Canada Post mix. It's not going to save the company. It certainly is not going to address the deficits that the corporation has begun to rack up in the past 3 quarters since the new year began. And in any number of sectors, this is true. The internet has changed business models. I'm most familiar with those in the communication sphere. What I would suggest is that very few of us in this room would invest our children's college fund in Canada Post. It looks to me like the several unions with which Canada Post has agreements have recognized that there is a new reality at Canada Post. I've seen wage concessions, benefit concessions on the part of unions. Labour wants to be part of the solution with respect to Canada Post's challenges. and it's working to do so. The amount of costs that have been driven out of HR, even the conference board recognizes is not going to go any further. If I take a leap and I assume that the projections that people are throwing around there with respect to what the deficits are going to be are somewhere in the correct ballpark, somewhere in the right order of magnitude, I still don't think the Canada Post has to hit the big red button. There's no unicorn solution to the situation that Canada Post faces, but I think that a mix of growth at Purolator, potentially alternative day delivery and some reduced service standards, new revenue lines, and we heard particularly this evening about banking as one of those, and targeted price increases that aren't going to hurt those who are most disadvantaged, could lead to lower operating deficits at the court. But in order for it to achieve its public interest mandate, if there is still an operating deficit, I believe that the corporation's largest shareholder, which is you and I, the taxpayer, are going to have to make up the difference. I don't think that should be on a permanent basis. For at least the next decade, there will continue to be a large socioeconomic digital divide. That means that many will not have access or be able to use online alternatives to what people currently do by household mail. Asking people to use community mailboxes or even post office pickup will only encourage more driving in our neighborhoods, in which we're trying to achieve exactly the opposite. We don't have the land set aside in urban areas for super boxes that in the suburbs require laybys and are car oriented. The city doesn't have the resources to deal with the upkeep around community mailboxes. And to my knowledge, the agreements that we need to be put in place between municipalities and Canada Post with respect to compensating for increased costs in the use of the lands are not in place. The current proposal hurts the most vulnerable most and has been poorly thought through with respect to impacts on cities. At a high level, it's a knee-jerk reaction to a classic problem of market failure. We cannot expect Canada Post in this environment to achieve positive market results and still meet its public interest mandate. There may well still be a significant operating deficit at Canada Post moving forward, but the burden of making that up cannot be unfairly put on the backs of the vulnerable and cash-strapped municipalities. Mail is a public good that ultimately will have to be provided as a public service. So where do we go from here? The city should act by lending its voice to the chorus of those calling for this decision to be reversed. If this can be achieved by crafting a council-voted statement, that would be ideal. If the required level of consensus is missing, however, then I would suggest that at least an open letter signed by the mayor and those councillors who were on side could also be potentially effective. Certainly, if I were elected, I would support either. I'm happy to stick around and take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you to Jeff for coming. I appreciate his willingness to do that. And in turning to the final discussion, I guess maybe I'll just check. Does anybody have specific questions they might want to direct to Jeff, since we do have him here and he just did make a statement? Maybe think about that. What I'm going to do, just to follow that, because I think it does kind of fit with the way Jeff just wrapped up, I'm going to just share and actually read out the organizers of the event tonight, mainly me, in terms of drafting this. We put together a draft petition, as I said, for Councillor Hobbs and Mayor Watson. And I want to just read what the petition is calling on the council and elected representatives to do. We call on our elected representatives to, number one, clearly and publicly oppose the Canada Post Corporation announced plan to terminate our home mail delivery and drastically increase postal rates, and any plan to privatize our public postal service. Two, work with council colleagues to pass a formal resolution of Ottawa City Council opposing the Canada Post plan and urging the Government of Canada to pursue consultative and informed discussion of enhancing postal services through postal public banking or other options. And number three, to formally consult on these issues with representatives of our local seniors organizations, disability rights and access organizations, and organizations working on behalf of low-income residents, and publicly report on the results of these consultations. That's a petition that everybody in the room can sign. Maybe I'll share this with whoever wants to take it to the back. And I guess that then brings us to a kind of a final go-round. We're gonna definitely wrap up before 9 o'clock. Yeah, let's take a few questions and comments specifically about really the theme of this final discussion, which is what do we think we can do about it? What could an organization like Solidarity Against Austerity or other organizations that may be represented here do about this situation in the coming months where this is going to become an increasing issue? Okay, I've got two hands over here. You were first then, David.
Yeah, I was just a point of order, maybe.
Point of order.
We do have a person that is running in this area for the municipal or the provincial government that just arrived here, so that person may want to have a moment to speak.
Okay, well,
Just thinking, well, we had others, if that's okay with the forum, maybe.
Sure.
people comfortable with that? We'll keep it, similarly limited to no more than 3 minutes. We don't want lengthy speeches because I think we do want. Could you just describe your name and your situation?
I'm Jennifer McKenzie. I'm running for the provincial seat in Ottawa Centre for the Ontario NDP. I don't know what to say except that the mail has been delivered forever. And I don't know what has changed so that it should stop. It's part of who we are, part of our character, and part of our country. And I am only just here and hearing what you have to say, but it always struck me that what we should be doing is expanding the postal service to people who don't have it, as opposed to contracting it to people who do. And so I am strongly behind the movement and can support you in any way that I can. I'd be happy to do so. So thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
When we talk about the fact that the goal of Canada Post is to kill it and to privatize it, I think that people have to realize that this is becoming more than a project. It's an extremely urgent matter. In fact, Canada Post is already on the way to privatization. You used to have in this city 16 retail postal offices all over the city. I don't think there's more than 5 or 6 left. I'm not sure the exact. There's 6 left. Yeah, you know, because you visit them all.
No, I'm missing one.
Anyway, besides that, if people remember, in the second of last omnibus bill, one of Harper's gems, he introduced legislation which deregulated international mail. So that took international mail out of the realm of Canada Post, and also it took away millions and millions of dollars of revenue from Canada Post and gave it to the international mailers. So take into consideration, when we talk about the bottom line and how Canada Post is so extremely concerned about preserving postal service, and they're going to lay off 7,000 people because it's going to cut their costs and it's going to save the post office. That's the excuse they give. Well, what happens when you give up international mail? What happens when you close down retail post offices and stop providing service to people? How does that attack the bottom line of the Canada Post? They've been consistently undermining the revenue of Canada Post, and the final blow is going to be when they take away 7,000 more letter carriers, which is also, these 7,000 letter carriers, the work that they do is the value on which the post office survives. That building down there on Heron Road wouldn't survive for 1 minute if it wasn't for the work of these people, the people on the inside, the letter carriers, and all the drivers. So if you lay 7,000 more of them off, then that's going to completely wipe out the post office. It'll prevent it from being able to provide universal service to all the people. And then they're going to say, well, now we have to privatize. We have no other choice. We have to sell to. So the point that I'm trying,
one concrete suggestion, but what would you do? Because I think a lot of people in the room very convinced.
Okay, well, the reason that I'm saying all these things is that it's not just a question of what we have to do, it's a question of time. Because the fact that these things are happening means that if this elimination of door-to-door delivery is going to take place, which was already announced, 11 communities across Canada by the autumn, that means...
Starting Canada, by the way.
That's right, Canada and a number of other communities across Canada. That means that Canada Post has to start doing route evaluations 3 or 4 months before. They have to start doing volume counts, which means that the whole process is underway. Definitely, I agree that the report on postal banking is something that we should back and support. The fact of the matter is that we have to act very quickly because these things are already all being implemented.
Okay,
It's
brother,
not
I
a,
totally agree. Do you have a suggestion for how we might act?
well, I think one of the things that needs to be done.
Briefly.
Briefly, okay. I think that first of all, your initiative here in calling the meeting in communities like this is extremely good because it's going to take community
So more
organizations.
meetings like this?
No, not just meetings, but I think community organizations where people can decide that this is not the direction that Canada wants to go.